Right.
Love these.
All right.
These Google backgrounds are really cool, huh?
Pretty awesome, right? Yeah, absolutely.
It's pretty real. It's just a matter of getting the lighting right to match.
Yeah, correct. Yours is looking awesome. Let's get mine.
I saw somebody else using this, so I thought I'd copy.
Yeah, that's a good one. Right. So yes, so what we were talking about. So we wanted to discuss mindfulness meditation and mindfulness and its relationship with Buddhism. Obviously, a lot of what we talk about as mindfulness meditation in 2023 originated from the Buddhist teachings. You'd agree with that, Dave? Is that right?
Yeah, I think the term mindfulness, is from Buddhism originally. Yeah,
exactly. So maybe a bit of an intro in that case, Dave. So Dave, you're sort of the founder and CEO of MyResolve Psychology, which is a really awesome venture which combines psychology with meditation. Would you like to give us a sort of a brief rundown of MyResolve?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so it is always evolving, but yeah, the best way to explain it at the moment is that it's a online psychology service where it's we are developing digital therapeutics. So there's like tools to help with your personal growth in conjunction with your visits with your psychologist. So it could be in the form of homework, digital therapeutics, but it could just be something simple. You could say an assessment is like a digital therapeutic.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to explain what a digital therapeutic is. So there's a lot of different digital, but we have developed a few like CBT exercises in a digital format. So it's this is an example of a digital therapeutic. We also have courses,
brilliant
courses and things which are also digital therapeutics. And people can use them at their own discretion, or they can use them in conjunction with their psychology visits. So yeah,
that's awesome. That's really awesome. And in your experience, so Dave, if you don't mind me mentioning, just you've got a lot of experience in meditation, particularly within the Buddhist sphere. Having in fact spent some time, do you want to talk about your own personal experience with meditation and how it's evolved over the years for you?
Yeah. So I mean, it did start quite a while ago. I wasn't introduced to it by my parents. It was more something I started getting into self-development. This is a long story. I'm going to try and summarize it quickly. Getting into self-development, wanting to get the most out of life. And a lot of the books said, meditate. Meditate is going to help speed up the growth, speed up the transformation, speed up the development. And so, just getting into it. At the start, it was a real slog trying to figure out how to meditate. And it wasn't until I went to an ashram in Sydney, a yoga meditation ashram in Sydney. And that's where I feel my meditation started to take off. That's where I really started getting interested. Before then, it was a real grind. It was like, it was meditation on steroids once I got to that ashram. And then from there...
You had sort of had some introduction to meditation through other people or through your own reading?
Yeah, I can remember reading and going through a few like one-day workshops, going to a few uni kind of classes on meditation. And I was doing yoga classes. And but not really got a handle on meditation yet. It was still just an idea
Okay. Well, that's very interesting.
And then so it just grew from there, and just finding different ways to meditate. So
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I probably, I think it's probably fairly similar in my case as well, but except that obviously I grew up in a Buddhist family, and meditation and Buddhism and the Buddhist way of life was very much part of my upbringing. But I only really sort of started to discover meditation probably in my early 20s when I moved to Australia at the age of 18, 19 by myself. And I sort of, you're surrounded by your own thoughts and so on and so forth. Fortunately, I had gone to a Buddhist retreat, a 2-week Buddhist retreat in a monastery in the UK called the Amaravati Buddhist Monastery.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that one.
Yeah. So
Is that Ajahn Suchito? Is he there?
I think so, but this was during the era of Ajahn Sumedho.
Sumedho, okay, cool, yeah. Is he still alive?
I believe he is. He's in Thailand now. He's retired from the Amaravati monastery, and he's retired to a life of devoted meditation practice in Thailand. I believe this is what I've heard. Yeah. So
is he on a monk pension?
Yeah, it's interesting.
I got to see him in Sydney a few years ago, and I think he was already 80 by then. So
yeah, I think it's probably been about 20 years since I've seen him in person.
He's very wise, and you can see
extremely
all of what he speaks about is his own experience. He's like, he probably started off out of books, but now he just talks about his own experience, which is really refreshing.
Which is really great, yeah. Sometimes you need to have people talking about their own first-hand experiences. But I think he has the wisdom and the clarity to know what to say to the right audience, depending on their experience. Because I think one of the things with mindfulness meditation, and we can talk about this as well as we progress this talk, but there's mindfulness meditation, and then there's anapanasati meditation, which is focusing on a single point, or focus meditation. So the thing with mindfulness meditation is it's very much focused on wisdom, developing wisdom through self-insight, introspection. And that journey very much, a lot of preeminent speakers on this talk about the fact that it needs to be a journey of self-discovery. So if you're listening to someone talking about it, it can actually be problematic if they start to reveal too much about that journey before you discover it for yourself. So I think some of the really, really experienced speakers that know what they're doing, like Yuttadhamo Bikkhu, for example, on YouTube, he does quite a few talks on it, and he talks about the fact that as a student practicing, it's really important not to hear too much about other people's personal experiences in mindfulness and that journey. But it's still important to have a guide and someone that can walk you through that, or of course we talk about apps and so on and so forth. But mindfulness meditation, I feel it's important at this juncture that we distinguish those two types of meditation. That we've got mindfulness meditation, which is a very specific type of meditation that requires a lot of guidance, and some people need it more than others, and then there's what we're talking about here, which is focus meditation, or anapanasati meditation, if it's the breath that you're focusing on, which in 2023 has become misnamed as mindfulness meditation. So lots of apps out there that say this is they're doing a guided meditation on mindfulness meditation, but actually it's focus meditation. There are very few guided mindfulness meditation things out there. I mean, there's a few guided meditation sessions on YouTube from people like Joseph Goldstein, for example. But otherwise, most of the apps out there, and there's nothing wrong with them, but they're great apps, but they're misnamed as mindfulness meditation. But I think it's important to distinguish the two. So I mean, that's my take on it. What are your thoughts on that, Dave? And have you come across any issues with that sort of conflation between the two?
Yeah, I wouldn't really say issues, but it's more that mindfulness, like you said, just gets overused, I think.
Yes.
You hear people say even in the corporate environment, it's like being mindful of what you're doing. That's not really mindfulness. But
no.
So it is, misused, overused, but
I guess the issue that I envisage with the conflation that occurs, or the confusion between the two, is that if someone accidentally ends up on a mindfulness meditation practice or on a path down that road, and they don't have the appropriate guidance, or they haven't been put through to the appropriate channels, online channels or whatnot, to sort of talk them through that journey, it can be a difficult road. It can be a discouraging road. So I feel that whenever I can, especially to new practitioners, I try and distinguish the two things and make them understand that these are two separate things.
Okay. Do you want to just make that distinguish?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, certainly. So I mean, you talk about relating to one's own experience, like Ajahn Sumedho is doing now. But I think in my own experience, we talk about your sort of samsara habits, or how your mind is wired. So how your mind is wired, or how your brain is wired. So we all come from the womb with different wiring. And the way I see it is, some people are wired really well to do absorption meditation, or that's that focus meditation that we talk about. And then some of us are really, really more geared towards the mindfulness meditation. So, for example, myself, my brain is, I find, is more wired towards the mindfulness meditation. I don't tend to be able to hang around for too long within the absorption meditation space. I tend to immediately sort of default into this sort of mindfulness mode of reflecting, introspection, observing myself, and observing the self, and observing the observer type of thing. And that's mindfulness meditation, where I am observing my present moment, where I may be trying to bring my mind to a point focus, but I'm allowing thoughts that come through, observing how those thoughts make me feel, what they do, they're arising, and then also they're passing. And I don't grasp to them. I don't grasp to any particular thought or feeling as it comes and goes, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or ambivalent. I don't grasp onto them. So it's that arising understanding of being able to observe how the mind comes. It's the entire phase. If I go through a session of meditation, I may observe in the initial stages how we describe the monkey mind, where it's flitting between so many different things, and trying to divide its attention to all the different internal and external stimuli that we face in our daily lives. And then as I let that radio sort of, that static, die down, I'm able to then bring my mind to a space where I'm able to slow those thoughts down and observe their arising, their passing. And that's, to me, that's mindfulness, is being in the moment, observing thoughts coming and going, observing how they make one feel, observing the body, observing the physical state, observing the physical state on the outside, the physical state on the inside, and then observing as you advance in your practice those observations more and more. So that to me, and through that wisdom can arise, but that has to be one's own journey. That's a journey that cannot be shaped, or it can be, but I think it needs to be done by someone that's experienced in guiding people through that. And then there's the focused or the absorption meditation, which is what all of the apps are about. A lot of the apps out there are about talking through the different types of absorption meditation, or getting someone to basically get into that sort of swimming lane, if you like, of focused meditation. Whereas then you've got things like talks from Joseph Goldstein. Some of them are quite long, some of them are quite short, and some of them are just guided sessions on mindfulness meditation. And Joseph Goldstein, a preeminent speaker on mindfulness meditation, is really good, especially for people that are sort of getting a bit more experienced at it. He does some really good talks and sessions on mindfulness meditation that can be really helpful. So I think it's important. I tend to sort of steer people that way so they understand the distinction. A lot of the apps that you see on the Google Store or Apple Store are about absorption meditation, and that's the difference.
And so, if I understand correctly, when you are talking about mindfulness meditation, it's about being mindful of the present moment and noticing what is not the present moment, or what is coming up around the present moment. Yeah,
correct. Yeah, what is around at the time.
What's that?
So yeah, exactly. Being in the present.
Yep. And so, how do you know what is the present?
So, that's a good question actually, because it's a sort of generalized statement, isn't it? What is in the present? I think it's about that grasping. It's about grasping. That's trying to sort of make one conscious of the fact that if a thought arises in one's mind, whether it be positive or negative, pleasant or unpleasant, the mind may tend to be repulsed or grasp if it's pleasant, or lament if it's unpleasant, and ruminate on that unpleasantness. So being in the present is about bringing the mind to a point where it doesn't focus on a particular thought that comes in. It allows the thought to arise, observe how it makes you feel, and let it pass. So that can be really helpful in day-to-day life. A byproduct of that is it helps us to manage things like anxiety, unpleasant feelings, unpleasant thoughts, but also it helps us to emotionally regulate. So if there's something that's particularly pleasant and really, really, really nice to experience, we don't grasp onto that, because that also too can be unhealthy, because when you come down off that, then the fall is quite big. So grasp and Buddhist teachings warn against grasping or attachment, because it leads to disappointment and suffering. So bringing the mind to the present is a way of really effectively dealing with unpleasant emotions, but also it's a way of training the mind to be able to then in future, it's sort of like a martial art against the ups and downs of life. Your mind, you're training your mind to be able to deal with and flex between the ups and downs of life, and just not get carried away, not get too attached, not ruminate on the negatives, and just be in the present. That's how I see it. Yeah.
And it also sounds like can take a bit of time to get familiar with what the present moment is. It's a very conceptual idea, and that I think that's why people prefer to have a breath to focus on, or focusing on their feet while they're walking.
Yeah, that's a good one. In fact, I do that as well. I actually do a lot of walking meditation.
So they call it walking meditation.
Yeah, that's a lot easier to get into as well, especially if you've got a brain that's wired towards, mindfulness or whatever. But you're absolutely right. It does take a lot of discipline to sort of understand and sort of focus on the present. But in my experience, it can be really helpful, in navigating the undulations of life, and that's a byproduct. The prime focus, the prime objective of the Buddhist teachings and mindfulness meditation is to train the mind through wisdom to escape this cycle of, dependent origination and causality, to be able to escape that. It's a bit like the Matrix. It's training the mind to unplug from the Matrix. So it's actually, excuse me, sorry about this. It's actually inappropriate to, in that sense, to then describe it as a way of dealing with life, if you might say so. It's not really an appropriate thing. At least I feel that, there's an interpretation that mindfulness meditation is, some people might say it's a good way of learning to deal with life. But actually, that's not really the prime objective. It's a byproduct. It's a really good byproduct of mindfulness meditation, is that one is able to deal with the ups and downs of life in modern civilization in 2023. But it isn't the end goal. The prime objective is to escape this cycle of dependent origination and causality, to escape the cycle of rebirth and samsara. So I think the absorption meditation, therefore, is possibly the more useful meditation for day-to-day existence, and it's a lot more accessible, as you say. It's not as abstract a concept to grasp in terms of its practice.
Yeah, abstract is a good word, and I think it reminds me of when, and I've probably talked about this before, when I was in the monastery, how they talk about, like, a lot of people will come to the monastery and just want to, spend more time meditating.
Yeah.
Like do 10, 12 hours a day meditating. Then you hear the abbot say, and that's like the head monk.
Yeah.
He'll be like, no, the most important thing is to create the conditions so that when you do meditate, it's just, you just glide into it. It's just easy. There's no force. There's no effort. It's just easy, because you can't force stillness. You can't force.
No.
You can force focus, but it's not going to endure. And
well, that's right.
It sounds like the same with mindfulness. It's like you could try to make it happen, but ultimately it's the conditions, it's the practice that you have surrounding it, and the situation you're in really helps.
That's an interesting thing you just said there, because I've been in discussions with a fellow Buddhist practitioner who wants to pervade or spread the sort of the word of Buddhism and meditation and the Eightfold Path through corporate Australia. Their argument is that, or the sort of the model of that sort of project is that setting up the right conditions through the Eightfold Path in any sort of community or corporate environment means that you are setting up the ideal conditions for meditation to occur, for a peaceful mindset, a peaceful community, etc., etc.
Yeah.
I think that's great, but unfortunately, I don't know that it's necessarily realistic in corporate Australia, which is,
just
fraught
living.
with
I just think living in Sydney is a busy life in Sydney with a family.
Exactly right.
I don't want to be too negative, but I also remember the same head monk saying, let's say the path to enlightenment is it's like traveling to Perth. If you're a monk and you got the right conditions, it's like going in an aeroplane.
Exactly.
But if you don't have the right conditions, you got a family, for example, and maybe other people who challenge your belief and don't support you. It's more like walking to Perth. So
literally,
it's a very different path. And so
I've just flown back from Perth overnight through the red eye on the red eye flight, so I know exactly how long that flight is. So so it's challenging regardless, but it's having conditions that makes that path as easy as possible. It's like having being able to have access to the Virgin Lounge or the Qantas Lounge, or getting on the flight, you priority boarding pass, etc., etc. It's having all the conditions set up right so it can be done. And that's challenging, and some of that is luck, some of that is sheer pot luck, but nevertheless, perseverance and determination can help. But I, as I said, that's just my opinion. But I feel like trying to set up the Eightfold Path on all those conducive conditions when one is engaged in, a community like Sydney or a corporate environment, which is where its fundamental crux of progress and being able to survive as a business is focused on goal setting, achievement, success. A lot of that is the premise is greed. So it's difficult. It's a fine line to tread, but nevertheless, I still think the premise of spreading the word of meditation and the practice of meditation far and wide is definitely positive.
And mindfulness.
Mindfulness, yes. Yeah.
So it also reminds me of when I was in the monastery, and the head monk, he also said some of the best meditators that he's seen, or practitioners that he's seen, are the older female supporters, because they do so much work, they're so generous, they're so giving, and it's, I guess, because they're older, they've been doing it for longer, and so they just built up all this good vibes, good
energy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then, so when they just sit, it's like, I've done so much good, I'm just going to bathe in that goodness. But they don't even think about that. But they're not thinking about meditating or improving their mindfulness, or it's just, if they get to meditate, great. If they're not meditating, they're just going to help out as much as possible.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
But yeah, I think
the vibrations is really what you mentioned, the energy. But there is people talk about the vibrations, positive vibrations in Buddhism and meditation. Do you want to talk a bit about that, your experience in that regard, Dave?
So I think what first comes to mind is the right environment again. Like if you're in a monastery, for example, there are other people who are practicing, other people who are also trying to cultivate more good thoughts, and so there's naturally going to be what you'd expect, very wholesome interactions, people not getting too emotional, not too upset. So that is supportive. And then you've got other people who want to meditate, so they're going to be in that frame of mind, and that you experience that when you talk to them, you experience that when you're meditating together. And yeah, the monastery that we stayed in was in the national park, so it's all very natural. There's no it was like off the grid place, so it's like fully sustainable. So you don't have electric what do you call it, power lines coming through it. You don't have phone towers with all their vibrations. So you're getting good vibes from the animals, from the trees, from the nature, from walking in the.
That's amazing.
So it all helps.
Yeah.
I feel like it's it's more conducive for mindfulness or meditation to be walking through a forest rather than the CBD or something.
Yes,
that's my own experience.
100% agree. Yeah,
and I guess that's what I mean by good vibes. When you get back to that good vibration, there's a lot of different ways you can.
Yeah, I think I guess one of the aspects that I've heard about is positive vibrations emanating from the practice of compassion and loving kindness. So in Buddhism, there's metta. Yeah, metta's featured a lot in the Buddhist teachings, not only Theravada Buddhism, but also, of course, Tibetan Buddhism. The fundamentals of Tibetan Buddhism are compassion and loving kindness. And so, but Theravada Buddhism talks about the most purest distilled form of loving kindness and compassion is that of a mother's love for her child. It's such a pure form. So cultivating that, even towards one's own aggressors and enemies, can be really powerful, and it can quite literally, you will feel this. My experiences, you can feel that the change in your vibration, the change in your physicality, the change in your external physicality and internal physicality. Your pulse rate slows. Your sweat glands calm down. You actually emanate more heat, I find, which is interesting. But when you heat, when you change your attitude towards a situation or a person where it's unpleasant, where you change it to loving kindness and compassion and understanding. You instead of I can't believe they've done this to me, to you know what, let me try and put myself in their shoes and what they're going through today. As in the simplest example is someone cutting you off at the lights, for example, because they're in a mighty hurry. One can get really upset at that, or think, geez, I really hope that person gets some time and peace to reflect on whether the rush that they're putting into their days is good for them, is good for their health. I really hope that their day gets better for them. It's not as chaotic. Versus, and you instantly calm down. Your physicality changes. You instantly feel compassion. That's compassion. You're putting yourself in their shoes. And geez, I hope their day gets better. Versus, God, I can't believe that guy cut me off like that. I'm gonna go after him, tell him about it. It changes. You calm down, you relax. It's cool. I'll let it go, and I will radiate positive vibes towards him or her, and I'll make sure. I hope their day gets better. I will their day to get better. That energy, that vibration, is people talk about these vibrations as having a really positive influence on one's own physicality, but it also helps in terms of one's ability to then get the mind into a focused state.
Mm. Mm, mm, mm.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think it's really good if you have the capability to do that. I keep talking about my time in the monastery, and I'm going to do it again. But I remember one of the first things that I learned when I was there is like, stop worrying about, you know, how other people's energy is affecting you. Stop thinking about how your energy is affecting other people. And
wow,
looking after your you know, like whether you decide to get angry at someone, it's nothing to do with them. It's about deciding, you know, I'm gonna forgive this person because it's actually good for my health. So rather than saying, you know,
absolutely,
I'm just gonna forgive them blindly, or, you know what I mean?
Right.
I'm gonna forgive them because that's the best thing to do. You actually have a reason for why you would forgive them. And
that's it.
I think in the case of living in Sydney or driving, for example, and getting upset, it's not always easy just to say, oh, I, you know, wish them well, because it's not so much about the other person. It's more about you and the state that you've got yourself in. And if you're in a better state, you know, this person and their behavior may not affect you. But at this point in time, based on how you are, what they did, it bothered you. And so the important thing is to recognize how it makes you feel.
Yeah.
And then, for me, I can't just blindly, I feel it is a bit blind to say, well, they probably had a bad day. I wish they have a good day. I'm not at the point where I can do that most of the time.
No, look, I think that's a very simple example, but I mean, if I were to extrapolate into my own personal circumstances, you know, I've had difficult interactions in my corporate work. You know, I've worked in some pretty high-powered organizations in my career, and I'm still working in corporate Australia. But yeah, managing those relationships can be difficult because, you know, there's a lot of undertones and nuances to why someone will behave in a certain way in a corporate environment, and you won't know why often. But one tends to simply reflect on how that person's behavior has affected you, as in how it's impacted your work or how it's potentially curtailed the length of your contract, because, you know, they've gone and upset a provider, and so therefore, you know, your purpose in your organization is maybe cut short. Things like that. So then it's about, well, what can I do about that? What can I do about that? I could just sit there and stew on it and get really angry and get upset at that person. And if all it's going to do is, as you said, you focus on, you know, the effect it's having on you, on yourself, and you realize, actually, that's really unhealthy, because all it's doing is it's winding me up. But in fact, a nice and easy way, or a way that facilitates that sort of changing in your attitude, or changing the gear, the clutch, if you like, to change that gear, is to think, you know what, that person, she had to do that, or he had to do that. They had no choice, because the remit of their position, their job description, means that they have no other choice but to do what they did. And they're in such a difficult place. Their job is so hard. So I completely understand why they've done that. So then I forgive them, and in the process, that helps. It's the clutch that helps you change gear in terms of your attitude. You know, that old Mambo T-shirt, Shift for Brains. You got to have a clutch for that. And the clutch here is the compassion or the ability to sort of think about, why did they do that? It's not personal. I don't think it's personal. If it is, oh well. I need to move on from that. I can't please everybody. I am who I am. But if it's not personal, geez, man, they had to do that. They had no choice but to do that. And that is a tough gig, for them to be able to go to sleep at night and do what they do. That's tough. I understand. I forgive them.
Yeah, it's good. Okay. What's that?
I think that can be really powerful.
Yeah, and it does take a bit of
practice,
reflection.
But that's a really a big example where if someone's experienced a big change in their life, and we're trying to understand that. But that instant split-second reaction to a bit of road rage on the street, to be able to exercise compassion there, that takes a lot of development and a lot of evolvement of. I'm still not there. I still default to the old on the horn, but the point is, it's that extrapolation, it's that practicing, the practice of loving kindness, purveying it into every aspect of your life, and applying it to different situations in your life, whether in the present, in the moment, if you can. Wow, that's amazing if you can do that. But that takes a lot of practice. But even retrospectively, thinking about the aggressors that you had in your past, how their actions have affected your life, and thinking, I'm going to stop feeling all this hatred and all this angst towards those people, and I'm going to change that to, what, I get it, and that helps. So then that's those first steps of changing one's sort of psyche and attitude. I think it can, if you practice it and you sort of apply it to different aspects of your life, then that it's conducive towards a peaceful mind, a peaceful state of mind, a more peaceful state of mind. Yeah. And
I think as you say that, it makes me think of having an intention.
Yes.
So it's having an intention during the day that, I know I'm going to interact with people, but it's just going to be water off a duck's back for me, something like that, as you go about your day, and keep reflecting on that. And you don't have to know how it's going to be water off a duck's back, but you just hold that intention.
That's right.
Your own intelligence will show you how you can move through it quicker, because you're holding that intention, creating the possibility that it can be water off a duck's back. Instead of you may have the intention, I'm going to stick up for my respect or something, I'm going to fight for my respect. It means, you're not going to put up with shit from people, but it doesn't mean it's going to be water off a duck's back. So having a clear intention is very important. I guess all of this in the context of mindfulness, when you are when you are in the present moment, it's like these are the kind of things that can drag you away, that you can get attached to. It's like remembering, that dude in the Corvette this morning cut me off, and it's like that comes up again when you're trying to focus, or when you are, experiencing the present moment. You've got these memories that drag you.
Or thoughts, stimuli, isn't it? Yeah.
You got to figure it out, how to get past it, how to move on.
Yes. But just coming back to that sort of the adopting compassion, loving kindness, and understanding to sort of one's day-to-day, would you say that that's probably a large part of what that monk was talking about in terms of those
environment?
environment and those older nuns in the monastery and how they were going about their lives? Do you think that's a lot to do with it? Compassion, loving kindness, the giving, the acts of giving, it sort of becomes a lifestyle, a way of life.
Yeah. I think some of the large qualities that help you to, I don't know, have a more positive mindset is focusing on gratitude, focusing on wanting the best for other people. Well, I think it's a Buddhist practice called mudita. You're thinking about enjoying other people's good fortune rather than being in competition with them. You know, my meditation is better than yours, or it's rather
Sure.
best meditation they can. You know, I hope. And yeah, I guess that's going to help in the scenario of the car we were talking about before.
Yes,
like,
yes.
If you think to yourself, okay, that guy, you know, it didn't come off very well for me, but, you know, I hope he has a really good day. I hope.
Yeah.
If you can honestly feel that way about other people, then that will really help your mindfulness and your ability not to get affected by other people's actions. But,
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, for me, it still feels a bit passive aggressive. It's
Oh, really? As in,
because there's still an element of like arrogance, I think, in that. It's like,
oh yeah.
I'm better than them. I don't act that way. I don't treat people like that.
Oh, well, that's interesting. No,
there's something wrong with that person because they lacked the awareness to see that their actions were.
Sure.
So
I think that's something that's a good thing to call out, but I think it needs to be a bit more focused on self-preservation. I think, which is that you, instead of feeling or indulging in that anger towards that person, you're just, as I said, you're changing gear, and you're changing gear by thinking, geez, I hope that person's day gets better, because that you know, I know what it's like to be in that rat race of trying to get from point A to point B in Sydney. And it's tough. And so out of self-preservation, you sort of change that gear instead of I guess a point of a superiority or anything like that. I think that's unhealthy. That's unhealthy. You're right. Yeah, that needs to be carefully managed. And that's again insight. It's that insight meditation. It's sort of being insightful about and skillful about the thoughts that you entertain in your head.
Yeah, and I guess it's something to learn in each interaction throughout the day. That people may not, you know, cut you off on the street, on the road.
Yeah.
But if you've got ideas in your head that somehow you know more than the other person, or you're better than them, then that will also affect you.
That's right.
So,
that's right. Yeah, very true. Very true.
Like pity or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. I guess that's why it's really important to have a guide when someone's doing insight or mindfulness meditation, mindset meditation, to have someone to bounce those thoughts and reflections off of, so that they can tell you, actually, are you sure you're thinking about that the right way? You know, have you thought about whether you're thinking about it this way, or you need to protect yourself, or you need to guard against thinking about it this way? I think that's really important. Whether it be a monk or a fellow practitioner that's got more experience. So having tools which are such as online tools that allows one to actually access help at times of need like that, I think that's a really powerful potentially a very powerful thing. So having access to a mindfulness meditator or having access to a psychologist that you can, bounce these thoughts off of, the advent of telehealth and online tools, online self-help tools because of COVID has been amazing.
Yeah, and it makes me think about part of the product that we're developing is like people give a sample, like a journal entry, and then it gets analyzed with the algorithms to see, where they might be judging someone else, they might be thinking negatively about, they might have a belief that's disempowering. And so when they provide that journal entry, or then they can get feedback.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
that's really great. Yeah. Good. Wow. That's fascinating.
And I have one other thing. It's like in the meditation classes that we do each week, we do start off with a very material focus and then slowly getting to the more subtle levels. And it sounds like the mindfulness you're talking about is awareness of almost the most subtle, which is the present moment.
Yes, that's right.
And we start by being mindful of the body, mindful of the posture, mindful of how you're sitting. And then then you become mindful of your breathing. You become mindful of the movement of your breath, the sound of your breath. And so it's gradually getting more and more subtle until you are starting to become aware of being in the present moment, noticing when you are drifting off into memories about the day or the future or the past.
Yes.
And it reminds me of a quote that I read, I think, therefore I am. And it's like thinking is what takes you out of the present moment. And so that quote is saying, I think, therefore I am. And it's only because of the concept of you that you are taken away from the present moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? So that quote's sort of bandied around in discussions about self, the mind, and so forth, the existence of the soul, and so on and so forth. But actually, in its sort of, if you break that down, it really is talking about what the mind's doing in the present, in
becoming.
Yeah.
It's in that becoming and then attaching.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's
it's like you said before, grasping.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Grasping or attachment. Yeah.
It's like you keep creating an identity in every moment on top of what's already happening.
Well, that's right. Yeah. That's exactly right. I mean, and that's another Buddhist concept, isn't it? Every moment. There's no actual increment of time attached to that statement, but that says that every moment your mind is changing. Your you as a person is changing. You're not the same person you were a few seconds ago, or a few minutes ago, or 5 minutes ago. I often reflect on photographs. I look at old photographs. I sometimes don't see the point of photo albums, despite being a photographer myself.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, cool.
Look at photographs of the distant past, and I think, that's not me. That wasn't. That was someone else. And that's true. You know, you're not the same person you were 5 minutes ago.
And I often do personality assessments with people, and they change. The personality changes.
Exactly.
People, I've had people come to me and they'll say, I am such and such, I'm an INFJ. And then we do the assessment and there's something else.
Change. Here you go. I've got mine here. I've got my assessment here. And I'm pretty certain that I have changed over the years. But that was a few years ago when I was working.
What's that? The color personality? Which?
The HBDI profile.
Okay. Cool.
Very, very much a conceptual thinker back then. Probably still am, but under duress, I've become a bit more of an all-rounder, but still quite weak in terms of conservative thinking. I tend to be a lot more, out of the box thinker. But I've become a bit more organized, a bit more problem solving under duress. But in my natural nascent state, I'm a more sort of artistic, holistic thinker, synthesizer, conceptualizer. But I'm pretty sure if I did this now, I've become more, predictive, being a bit more prepared, planning, trying to anticipate outcomes rather than be reactive to outcomes, which is what I was in the past. So yeah, we change all the time, and those tests are actually a really good way to assess that, and assess one's a client or a patient's progress over time. Which assessment tool do you use, Dave?
So my favorite one for personality is the color code personality.
Oh yeah,
maybe we can do it on a chat one time.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
It's got like 45 questions, but maybe we can break it up. It's really good. I find it's great for getting to know the people I work with, but also myself. There's some old-fashioned terminology in there, so it's good to kind of reflect on how it relates. Those words relate. So, for example, like a word like obnoxious doesn't get used that much. It does a bit, but and there's another word called flighty. So a lot of people say, what does flighty mean?
Flighty mean.
So there's a few words there where it's interesting to contemplate how it relates to your personality. It can be quite therapeutic just to go through it.
Okay. Oh wow.
But yeah, it's definitely after doing it the first time I've changed, and I think part of it is having the awareness of what personality can be like, or what all the different types of or ways of being. So, yeah.
Sure.
It's cool.
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds really interesting.
And most of my clients that I do it with, they like it too. So it's good. But I also use the 16 personality. That's a good one too, which is it's kind of an adaptation of the Myers-Briggs, I believe.
Okay.
So the INFJ, but they just add one more letter on the end.
I see.
Which is to do with self-esteem.
Oh wow, that's very interesting.
So you can be an ENFJ, but you might be low self-esteem or high.
Okay. Oh, that'll be useful measurement. Yeah, to keep track of. Yeah, that's great. Wow. I think so. You mentioned that there's your colleague who is a practitioner as well that you wanted to invite to this call. That'd be great if they can come along. But you said we wanted to go and meet one of their contacts in person as well.
I think he's still a monk, this guy.
Aha.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
That will be interesting.
It would be
Yeah.
good to go interview some monks anyway. Go to
I
some monasteries and chat with them.
That'd be a great idea. That'd be a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, you always think you know what they're going to be, where they're going to be at, but because they're, living and breathing the monastic life,
And there's different there's different types of monasteries and temples, isn't there? There's the temples that are mainly focused on community.
yeah,
So that
a ritual or something.
Yeah. Whereas so the meditation practice is not as big a feature in those monks' lives. Whereas then you've got temples that are very, very focused on the meditation practice, and getting different perspectives of those ones would be pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah. Like during the rains retreat or something.
Correct.
Where the monks kind of hibernate and meditate more.
Yeah. Wow. That'd be great. Very good. Very good. Okay.
Cool. Well, good to chat again.
Really. Yeah.
Mindfulness, meditation. One last thing I will say, I remember when I was in the monastery and one of the senior monks gave a guided meditation, and he talked to, I think it's a more conceptual way of how you described mindfulness. So he imagined in his meditation, he imagined himself walking along the beach, along the sand near the edge of the water.
Yep.
And he imagined that, how the waves, the whitewash comes up on your feet while you're walking and then drops back down. And that was his idea of being in the present moment, was walking on the sand. And then when the wave came up, that was like being thoughts taking you away, and then you just wait for it to clear, that kind of thing. Is that similar to what you're talking about in terms of mindfulness? It's
very, very similar to
having that idea of what is present moment and then what's taking you away, what's distracting you.
Correct. I'm just trying to find a photograph actually where I was doing walking meditation on the beach some years ago, because it's been a default meditation of mine for something like 20-25 years, because it's so easy to sort of gear your head into doing it. But then I found I was doing it on a beach up in Port Macquarie once upon a time, many moons ago, and I found that doing the walking meditation in that area, or on that beach, on that sort of the border of where the waves come up and then they come down, I sort of, in a way, I thought of it that way: is you're focusing on the walking meditation, and then the wave comes up, because you're so focused on your feet, it's almost like a distraction. Comes, arises, and then it goes away. So, and you're effective. It's a really good analogy, because you that is exactly how thoughts arise in your normal sort of sit down meditation. So that is a great analogy. Yeah.
And you don't really judge the water too much. It just comes.
Well, exactly. No attachment there. It's the water came, it went. And ideally, if you're trying to aim to get to a state of practice where a thought, whether it be from an external stimulus or an internal stimulus, as in internal thoughts or a sound or something or whatever on the outside world, you're aiming to get to a point of practice where it arises, it passes, but you don't process it. You don't process what it's, you don't extrapolate it. You don't get attached to it. You don't ruminate on it. You don't think about it. Let it come and let it go.
Yeah, and that's I don't know if I mentioned this before, but that was a strong experience I had when I was in the monastery, just from consecutive days of meditating.
Yeah.
In meditation, it was literally like I was sitting in a movie cinema.
Wow.
And the screens opened and I was just watching these memories come up on the screen. And I had the same, I was enjoying it in the same way I would a movie. It was really cool. It was a, potentially disturbing memory, but because of the state I was in, I was just able to watch it like the waves coming up and going
out. Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting.
It was cool.
Yeah, that is really good. And that's another thing why it's really important to have guidance when you're doing mindful meditation, or seek those sort of talks from people like Joseph Goldstein, because when one starts to practice mindfulness meditation, those sorts of the movie reels that come through your head intermittently can become really frequent and really quite sometimes jarring. So being able to, understand where that's coming from is good, and those guided talks are really helpful to understand what that's about as well.
Joseph Goldstein is not someone I've followed much, so I'm going to have a look at that.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, absolutely. That's good. And if we make this into a video that we put on different platforms, I might put a link down the bottom. You can put a link down the bottom to any videos or on that you or post. Channel post on. Yeah, it's handy. But look, it's not for everyone. Like I said, different people's brains are wired differently.
I think that's an important thing to remember. I think that's why there are so many different practices, different personalities.
Many ways of doing it. But I think these are just the ones that are more commonly practiced and are probably similar to a business class ticket rather than a train journey across to Perth or yeah. So awesome. Well, it's been a great session, Dave. We've been wanting to do this for a long time. I've certainly been wanting to do this talk and sort of flesh out and bash out the differences between the different types of meditation that are commonly practiced, and then also talk about online tools, the importance of psychology and psychotherapy potentially being an aid to one's sort of introspection, self-development. So I'm really glad we did this, and hopefully we can keep doing this on a regular basis.
We'll definitely get some other guests on. I think would be good.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Different perspectives.
Absolutely. Yeah, brilliant.
Cool. Enjoy your day.
Yeah, you too, Dave. Thanks a lot.
See ya.
Good chat. See ya.